This week's episode, number 19, on the Spooky Coop, is entitled The Lake. A father and son embark on a canoe trip into a remote area where they encounter an evil spirit intent on taking what it needs to sustain its own malicious, ethereal survival. Greetings, and welcome to the Spooky Coop. I'm Paul.
And I am Michelle. And we're at the Spooky Coop.
Welcome to the Spooky Coop. Hope you're not chicken. And welcome to the Spooky Coop, here in our high-tech spooky studios located in the foothills of haunted New Hampshire, where background noise enhances your ability to achieve an altered state of being, almost surpassing that of an enlightened owl experiencing nirvana-like spookiness. So, sit back, relax, and be sure to let your guard down. It's more fun that way. Let us begin. 10 years ago, in the summer of 2014, I took my 8-year-old son Jack on a camping adventure by canoe to a lake downstate I knew about from a hunting trip that was on a native reserve. It was well into the forest and could be only accessed by a waterway. It would be a perfect introduction to the outdoors. We would have a great time. Thinking back to the fun I had on my first canoe camping trip with my dad, I laid out an easy route with mostly smooth water to paddle through. No rapids, just a few bumpy areas where we could get an exciting ride. I went to a store in the mall and got a bunch of imitation flint arrowheads and copies of old coins. Just to be sure everything was still safe and passable, I made the trip to the lake and back the weekend before. When I reached the lake, I hid the arrowheads and coins all over the area where we would camp. And on the way back, I stopped at the place I decided we would camp overnight on the way in and out to the lake to put aside a bit of kindling and dry wood, which I covered with a tarp, to be sure we would have it available in case of rain. I wanted this trip to be fun and easy for Jack. Paddling at an adult speed to get to the lake would be a 2-day journey when my son and I traveled together, taking our time. We started out mid-morning of the next Saturday. It was a great day, a clear day. The temperature was forecast to be in the low 80s to mid-70s, dropping only into the low 70s overnight. There was no rain in the forecast for the whole trip. Great weather for lakes. For half of the first day on the water, Jack was my bowsman and was happy, telling me stories about his school, his friends, and even the trees and fish we passed by as we paddled. We were going with the flow of the stream, so the canoe was moving easily with the current. When Jack finally apologized, saying he was too tired to paddle anymore, I made a big fuss about how hard it was for me to do it alone now that he wasn't helping with his strong paddling. He seemed truly proud of his strength and ability and picked up his paddle again. I told him that I was okay and I really wanted him to relax for the rest of the day. I would need his paddling strength tomorrow. I am very proud of my son. With all of Jack's endless chatter, it didn't seem long before we were at our first overnight stop. We beached the canoe and brought it onto shore. While I was taking out the tent, I asked Jack to get the wood I had covered at the corner of the campsite. I showed him how to start a fire, and we ate beef stew from a can and roasted marshmallows. As the sun went down, we sat by the fire and sang old campfire songs. It was a great day. I told Jack, "You really need to get into the tent and try and get some sleep. We're getting up first light and leaving. We need to get back on the water as soon as we pack everything up." I kissed him on the forehead. With a sigh, he climbed into the tent. "Good night, Jack. I love you, son," I said. "Good night, Dad. I love you too," he replied. I heard his sleeping bag zip up. "Hey, Jack, when we get to the lake, we'll have some real fun," I said with excitement. "We can go fishing and cook our catch on the fire pit that we'll build. We'll make super sticky double chocolate s'mores. Mom would take a fit if she knew what we were eating. I'll teach you how to bow hunt in the woods. Maybe we can catch a rabbit." "What about a bear, or a wolf, or a mountain lion?" Jack's voice rang out from the tent. "Could be," I said, knowing that animals like that were in the area, yet hoping beyond hope that the rule, "they are more afraid of you than you are of them," still applied. "I can show you what your granddad showed me, how natives made a fire from sticks and tree bark. Not one match. It's like magic, and a very useful thing to know if you're ever lost. And of course, if you're not chicken, we can tell ghost stories at night." "That's if you're not afraid," I said, ending the last sentence in what I hoped was a spooky voice, but not too spooky. Last thing I wanted to do was scare him to the point that neither one of us could get any sleep. "You can't scare me, Daddy," he said, then made an eerie sound back. "I'm 8 years old. I'm too big for that sissy stuff." I was glad that Jack was sound asleep before 9 p.m. I sat up by the fading fire and watched the stars for a while, then went into the tent and fell asleep next to my boy. The second day came. I was looking forward to seeing his face when we came around some trees and he saw the awesomeness of the lake that I told him I wouldn't name. It really is the most magnificent of all the lakes I've ever seen. I was up before dawn and started to pack up camp. I even managed to get Jack up at sunrise. He was in a really bad mood, sore from the previous day's paddle. "Here comes that time-honored cliché. Are we there yet?" I mumbled to myself. I needed a plan. I was going to wait until we got to the lake to tell him the legend of how it got its name, but I would have to tell him now to keep him interested while we paddled the last few hours to the lake. "Did I tell you about why this lake is haunted?" I said in a whisper once we got into the canoe and started to paddle. Jack looked at me dubiously. "Jack, you have to promise you will never tell anyone the name of this lake, unless you are on the banks of the lake itself. The old Odiki legend says if you do, the monster of the lake will come and get you," I whispered. Then said, "The name of the lake is Maji Manadu Nidi," I said in my most ominous tone I could muster, then settled into my story. "That means the devil's water. A long time ago, a great and powerful people called the Odiki lived here on the beautiful lake. It was one of their favorite places. There were lots of fish and deer to catch, and even moose. It was a place where they were happy. Then, one winter it was really, really bad. The snow was so deep it covered all their homes. It froze the lake so deep with ice that they couldn't cut through it to get to their fish, and even the deer and moose had run away or were lost in the snow. A lot of people died from the cold. The ice and snow had killed the trees, and the wood they chopped for fire was so frozen and wet with ice it wouldn't burn. The snow and ice came so fast and was so deep they couldn't even move out of their villages, and they were stuck there. A lot of them froze and more starved to death. That's when it became clear if anyone was going to live through the winter, they would have to start eating some of their own people. I made a chomping noise and wiggled my fingers. Jack jumped back. It was a horrible thing to do, but it kept the healthy ones alive. They say it was a great honor to give your life to become food so your tribe could live. And the people made it through the deadly winter. They swore to never eat human flesh again. But I let the word linger. There was one man, this guy who really loved to eat humans. He really loved human meat a lot, like really a lot. I emphasized in my best creepy voice, even after the bad winter was over, the Odiki people kept finding a body of one of their tribe here or there in the woods, eaten alive. "Maybe it was a bear that ate them," Jack said. "Bears don't use knives to cut bodies into pieces," I replied in my spooky voice. "When they caught the cannibal, they brought him to the medicine man who tried to put a spell on him to stop his hunger for humans. But something went wrong. He became a Maji Manadu, the most evil creature on earth. It lives forever, and no matter how much it eats, it's always starving for human meat. What happened to him? Jack asked. They say he was driven into the woods, where he comes out now and then to suck the meat off a human and toss their empty skin and bones into the lake, especially young tender ones. That's why it's called Maji Manidu Nidi, the Devil's Lake. That's just a story, right? Something to scare babies? Jack asked nervously. Well, Jack, I really don't know. I've never been stupid enough to tell anyone the name of this lake unless I was by the lake. Remember what I told you? Never tell anyone the name of the lake unless you're right on its banks. Dad, Jack asked uneasily, we're not on the banks of the lake. Yeah, I know, I said. It's just a story. But is it true? Was there ever a Majimani whatcha-call-it monster cannibal at the lake? Nah, it's just a story the local Odiki tribe tell to keep trespassers off the land, I replied. I was glad he didn't pick up on the fact that we were trespassing. By late afternoon, we got to the lake and set up camp. I told Jack a story about how natives and pirates had a war on the shore and sent him off to enjoy his treasure hunt for arrowheads and gold, while I set up camp and enjoyed settling in. A while later, he came running back. Daddy, look what I found. He held out his hands with enthusiasm. I found 9 real pirates' doubloons and 6 Apache warheads, he announced with pride. But the best of all, he pulled out a 6-inch long black flint blade from his back pocket. It was shiny and oily black. The edges on both sides were chipped to make it very sharp and dangerous. It came to a razor point on one end, and it was wrapped on the other end with well-worn leather to create a holdable surface. It was beautiful. I found a dragon-killing knife, he announced with excitement. Where did you get that? I took it away from him to give it a closer look. It was sitting in the bend of a tree, where the branches make the letter Y. He made the letter with his fingers. Take me there. I needed to know where he found this. Jack asked for his dragon killer knife back, but I kept it. It was too sharp for an 8-year-old. Besides, I felt like it somehow belonged to me. It was made for my hand. We walked through the woods to where Jack found the knife. Right there, Jack said, and pointed at a break in some branches. But I wasn't looking there. I was looking at a tall, bone-thin black figure standing behind the trees. Shreds of skin hung off its bones like gray, oily rags hanging off sticks of a bare, dead tree. Its empty red eyes looked everywhere and nowhere at the same time. When they made contact with my own, I could not look away. Oh, how I wanted to look away. Those dead red eyes bored deep into mine, past mine, to a place inside me I don't know about. Yuck! Do you smell that? Jack said with disgust. It smells like when the raccoon died under the porch at the tailor's house. What? His voice broke through the red eyes' hold, and I looked down at him. Jack was right. There was an awful smell of death, but it wasn't quite the same as the raccoon or roadkill. It had a sweeter smell. It was surely death, but not the type of death I knew. Too many stories, I thought to myself. Too many stories. I looked back up, and the creature with its hypnotic red eyes was gone. Within seconds, so was the smell. Let's get back to camp. I put my hand on Jack's shoulder and turned him around, and we headed back to camp. That afternoon, we did the things I planned. We fished, cooked our catch. We swam, practiced some archery, learned to start fires, and played a lot. And we cooked wieners over the fire, followed by s'mores that really would make his mom cringe. Later, when Jack fell asleep that night, I sat and searched for the constellations in the millions of stars above me and imagined the nature of space. Just as I was starting to feel a bit sleepy, something jarred me to full awareness. A figure walked out of the bush. I couldn't see details in the dark. It gave the impression of being tall. A moose? No. Too short. A man? No. Too thin. As the dark figure walked in front of the light from inside the tent, it cast a silhouette of the same creature I saw in the woods. The thing stepped out of the shadow and into the fire's light. I couldn't believe my eyes. The creature was tall and skeleton thin, as if it had little or no muscles under its tight, brittle skin. It was wearing rags of shredded clothing. It turned its emaciated face to look straight at me as it advanced toward where I was sitting. I was frozen with fear as I sat by the campfire, its glowing deep red eyes illuminating the endless darkness of its decrepit soul. Ice from the coldest depths of the darkness from where it began to flow through my veins. I felt helpless to move. My son! Jack! I have to save Jack, was all I could think as it came closer and closer. I knew I needed to get up and run, yet I couldn't move at all. As this thing continued to approach, the sickening sweet smell of decay increased, as did my hysteria. Yet I could do nothing but shake with fear. I was shaking so hard, I was sure there would be a hole where I was sitting in the ground, the last mark of my existence. "Who are you?" My voice shook as I spoke. It said nothing. It and its foul smell continued to move forward until its dry, hollow face was looking down into mine, its red eyes connecting to mine in a dark embrace I was incapable of breaking. "Get up and walk with me," it said. The voice was not unlike sand and groans. The smell of its breath was enough to make me want to pass out from such nausea as I never experienced before. "Now," it commanded in its horrible voice. I did. I don't believe I could have refused. I felt like its puppet. I instinctively picked up the knife my son found in the woods and put it into my belt. Then I followed the creature away from the fire into the woods. At least it was leading me away from Jack. He led me to the place where my son found the knife. Maybe all he wanted was for me to return the knife to where Jack found it, and he would be gone. But sadly, I was wrong. Oh, so very wrong. When we arrived at the tree, he told me to sit. I did. I had no choice. There was a loud cracking and dust flew around me as this creature sat with me. When he was settled, he began to speak. "I am I.C.D. You know of me. I heard you explain who I am. I am pleased with the offering you have brought to me. I want you to know I am grateful to you." He bowed his head, slightly, as if giving me thanks. "Okay," I replied, totally perplexed. "You're welcome, I guess?" I said uneasily, wondering what he meant. Was it that we found his sacred knife? That must be it. Why else would he have brought me here? That must be it, I reasoned. "It has been so long since I have had such a fine honor. I would like to do you a favor, a kindness. I wish to let you take part in the ceremony when I receive your gift." I couldn't believe what was happening. Was I really talking to an old dead I.C.D? Or was my evening relaxing smoke mixed with something it should not have been? If paranormal stuff was real, was he offering me something at a once-in-a-lifetime event and I didn't want to pass it up? "Yes, I would be honored to take a role in your ceremony. When is it and what do I have to do?" I said. Honestly, I still wasn't sure what I was experiencing was real. "You are a fine, strong warrior." He put his hand on my shoulder. It felt both cold and oddly hot at the same time. His touch made me dizzy. I closed my eyes tightly to get some balance and saw his piercing red eyes in my head. I could taste his foul breath on my tongue. Soon, everything resolved itself and I could open my eyes and I was okay. "Now you are ready for our ceremony. Tomorrow, when the sun comes up over the lake, be ready. Be sure to have the ceremonial knife with you. We will be together. I will see you then." His body cracked and dust fell about him as he stood. I held my breath, hoping not to breathe in the clouds of him he left in his wake. "When the rising sun comes up over the lake," he repeated, and then vanished into the darkness. I returned to the campfire. I thought about going into the tent and trying to get some sleep, but there was no way I could even think of closing my eyes. I kept wondering, did I actually experience what I think I did? Or was it a weird, vivid dream? Was I the one who got caught up in the spooky stories I told Jack? Or, I shuddered, what if it was real? All these thoughts dangled and danced in my brain. It didn't matter. I didn't get a minute's sleep all night. Before the sun was up the next day, I woke Jack and told him about the dream I had about how the Maji-Manadu appeared to me and told me he would be coming to the lake that morning to do a special ceremony, to pick up his special knife that Jack found. Of course, Jack, being 8 years old, was over the top excited. Then suddenly he stopped dead in his tracks. "Dad, didn't you say that the Odiki tribe said the Maji-Manadu was an evil spirit?" It hit me. I had forgotten about that. "Well, I guess they were wrong. Turns out he's just a spirit who wants his knife back, and we're going to help him," I winked. "That's if he shows up. It was probably just a dream." Jack shrugged. "That would be crummy if it were just a dream. I want to see him. Do you think he will?" "I'm sure he will," I replied. Actually, I wasn't sure at all, and was hoping it was a dream. I really didn't want Jack to see something so disturbing. We watched as darkness started to fade, and daylight began to peek over the trees across the lake. The sun rose higher and higher. That's when it happened. I felt an icy cold feeling run through my veins. My eyes felt like they were rolling back into my head and then forward again. Every time they rolled up, I saw the demonic red eyes of the Maji-Manadu inside my head. There was something wrong. I needed to end this. I couldn't speak, so I thought as loud as I could, "Here is your knife. Ceremony done. Now, go!" Then I pulled the knife from my belt loop. "Yes, my knife. The ceremony can begin. Now for the ceremony, bring me my gift. First we must kill it, then skin it as in the old ways," he said in my head. "Only then can we gorge ourselves on the young flesh, strong warrior." As he spoke, he took full control of my body. Every muscle, every movement was his and his alone. We, that being his evil being in my flesh, approached my son Jack, who, without a clue to the danger coming towards him, did nothing. He didn't run or even move to the side to avoid my, or rather the Maji-Manadu's, approach. The evil devil wolf, in his father's sheep's clothing, if you will, grabbed him by the collar and lifted him off the ground, his feet dangling about a foot in the air. The evil thing gave his collar a twist. Jack's face turned red. With a dark tone, but in my voice, it said, "You will be juicy and very tasty." Jack said nothing. His collar was twisted so tight that he couldn't speak. His face was getting redder by the second. What followed seemed to me to be hours long, but in truth was not much more than it would take to strangle an 8-year-old from a twisted collar. "Let him go!" I screamed inside my head. "Soon," it replied in the same fashion. The Maji-Manadu, in my body, raised the flint knife, and I knew he was about to swing it in such a way as to slit Jack's throat wide open, just above where he was holding his neck, killing him instantly. Everything inside me fought to stop this horrible thing. I was not going to let this happen. I found my arm that held the knife and managed to toss the swinging blade far into the lake. As soon as it hit the water, the Maji-Manadu was gone. My mind was alone. I dropped Jack, then quickly picked him up again. this time holding him in an embrace close to my heart as he cried hysterically. Then I did something that was maybe the most selfish thing I've ever done, or maybe not. I lied to him. I told him that I was very sorry about what just happened, but a wild wolf had come up behind him and I had to get it. I explained that I panicked when I grabbed him and my hand got caught in his shirt neck. I couldn't untangle it and panicked even more. That's why he was choking. I explained that I was going to cut his shirt with a knife, but instead I threw it at the wolf because I could see it was about to grab you with its long, sharp teeth. I really hoped he would believe this. I knew my wife would go nuts on me when she heard a wolf tried to attack him, and that's why his neck was red and bruised. I also knew she would never believe the truth about an Odiki evil spirit, and likely divorce me. So the lie was to save my own skin. "Dad, why did you say I was juicy and tasty?" Jack asked. I had to think fast. I guess I was really thinking out loud why a wolf would want to eat you and not me. After all, I'm a bigger meal. I put him down. "Now, hurry up. Forget the tent. Just grab whatever is extra important, like our water and some of your food. I'll get the rest. Toss it in the canoe. We're getting out of here in 5 minutes." We were out and on our way home in not much longer than 5 minutes, with just my basics. Jack took his basics, which included the things he knew his mother would be mad if he left behind. I never wanted to see that cursed lake again, and any part of the woods around it. I needed to get us home as fast as possible. Despite the fact that I had no sleep the night before, a mixture of terror and adrenaline kept me going. I managed to paddle against the current throughout the day and late into the night. We arrived back at my car after midnight. From now on, it's the movies or the arcade for Jack and I. And of course, I'll take him to the park to play ball. But that's as close to the forest I'm ever bringing him again. Well, dear listeners, what do you think of this week's watery tale? Do you think a person can be possessed by an evil spirit? If so, and they come to take you, just say no. You're busy playing Yahtzee and they're not invited. Ever. And remember, dear audience, be safe, be happy. As always, we wish you a week of hope and wonder. Until next time, when we see you in the Spooky Coop.